The stars were quiet that night. Admiral Una stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Hammer of Dawn, and watched the endless darkness of space through the observation window. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and gray hair tied back in a tight knot. She had served in the Terran Defense Fleet for 32 years. She had seen pirates, rebels, and border conflicts. But she had never seen war. Not real war. Not yet. The year was 2347. Earth had become the center of the United Terran Federation, a civilization that stretched across 12 star systems. Humanity had learned to travel between stars, to build great ships, and to make new worlds their home. They were peaceful people. They traded with other species. They shared knowledge. They believed that the galaxy was big enough for everyone. But not everyone in the galaxy believed the same thing. "Admiral," said a young officer, his voice tight with fear, "long-range sensors are picking up something. Something big." Una turned from the window. "Show me." The main screen flickered to life. At first, there was nothing but empty space. Then, slowly, dots began to appear. Hundreds of them. Then thousands. They moved together like a swarm of insects, emerging from the darkness between stars. 3,000 ships, the officer whispered. Maybe more. Una felt her heart grow cold, but her face showed nothing. She had trained herself long ago to hide her fear. Fear was a luxury that commanders could not afford. "Identify them," she ordered. The computer worked for several seconds. Then a name appeared on the screen, and Una felt the temperature in the room drop. Velthari Empire. Everyone knew the Velthari. They were the nightmares that parents whispered about to frighten children. They were a species of tall, insect-like creatures with hard shells and 4 arms. They had conquered over 40 civilizations across the galaxy. They took what they wanted. They enslaved those who surrendered. They destroyed those who did not. No one had ever defeated them in battle. And now they were coming for Earth, far away. On the observation vessel Steadfast, Captain Dohan received the same sensor readings. He was a calm man with a round face and kind eyes. He had spent most of his career doing boring work watching empty space, charting asteroids, escorting cargo ships. He had never expected to be the first human to meet an alien invasion force. "Open a channel," he told his communications officer. "Let's see if they want to talk." The channel opened with a burst of static. Then a face appeared on the screen, if it could be called a face. The Velthari Supreme Commander was massive, nearly 3 meters tall, with black eyes that reflected no light. His mandibles clicked as he spoke, and a translation device turned his words into rough human language. "Small creatures," the Supreme Commander said. "You stand in the path of the Velthari Empire. You have 2 choices. Surrender now and serve us as slaves, or resist and die. You have 6 standard hours to decide." Dohan looked at the alien for a long moment. Then he smiled, though his hands were shaking beneath his control panel. "I will pass your message to my superiors," he said. "But I think I already know their answer." The Supreme Commander made a sound that might have been laughter. "All prey says the same thing at first. Then they see our guns. Then they beg." The channel closed. On Earth, in a great hall made of white stone and glass, President Myray addressed the United Terran Council. She was a tall woman with silver hair and a voice like iron wrapped in silk. She had been elected 3 times because people trusted her. They believed she would keep them safe. Now she had to prove them right. "The Velthari have given us an ultimatum," she said, her voice calm and clear. "Surrender or die. They believe we are weak. They believe we will fall to our knees and beg for mercy." She paused and looked around the room at the hundreds of representatives from every human world. "They are wrong. The council erupted in noise, some cheering, some arguing, some crying. Myray waited for silence. "We did not build our civilization by surrendering to bullies," she continued. "We did not cross the stars by giving up when things got hard. We are human beings. We fight. We survive. We win." She turned to her military advisor. "Send word to Admiral Yuna. She has full authority to respond as she sees fit." Back on the Hammer of Dawn, Yuna received the president's message. She read it once, then twice. Then she turned to her communications officer. "Open a channel to the Valkyrie fleet," she said. "All frequencies. I want every one of their ships to hear this." The officer's fingers trembled as she worked the controls. "Channel open, Admiral." Yuna stood straight. She folded her hands behind her back. And when she spoke, her voice was as cold as the void between stars. "This is Admiral Yuna of the United Terran Federation. You have entered sovereign human space without permission. We do not wish for conflict. We have never attacked your worlds or harmed your people. But we will not surrender. We will not become your slaves. If you continue on your current path, you will find not prey, but predators. Leave now, and you may return to your empire in peace. Stay, and you will not leave at all. This is your only warning. There will not be another." She made a cutting gesture, and the channel closed. On the Valkyrie flagship, the Supreme Commander listened to the translation of her words. Around him, his officers waited in silence, their compound eyes fixed on their master. Then the Supreme Commander laughed. It was not a kind sound. It was the laugh of a hunter who sees his prey trying to stand on its hind legs. It was the laugh of someone who has killed 1,000 worlds and expects to kill 1,000 more. "Soft mammals," he said, his mandibles clicking with amusement. "They think they can frighten us with words. They think their little fleet can stop the Valkyrie Empire." He turned to his navigation officer. "Continue forward. Maximum speed. I want to be in orbit around their homeworld by tomorrow. We will burn their cities and take their children as servants. And we will make this Admiral Yuna watch before we kill her." His officers moved to obey without question. They had done this many times before. The pattern was always the same. The prey would threaten. The prey would fight. The prey would die. But they had never faced humans before. Across the solar system, hidden in the darkness, Admiral Yuna smiled a small, cold smile. She touched a button on her command chair. "All units," she said quietly. "Prepare for Operation Final Answer. The enemy is coming. Let them come." In the shadows of asteroids, among the rings of Saturn, beneath the ice of distant moons, lights began to flicker on. Engines warmed. Weapons charged. And humanity waited. The Valkyrie fleet moved through space like a dark cloud. 3,000 warships flew in perfect formation, their weapons ready, their crews eager for conquest. They had traveled across half the galaxy to reach this small blue world called Earth. They expected an easy victory. They expected slaves and treasure. They expected the same fear they had seen in 40 other civilizations. At the front of the fleet, the Supreme Commander sat on his throne of black metal. His forearms rested on the armrests, and his compound eyes watched the tactical display with bored interest. The human solar system grew larger on his screens. He could see their planets, their moons, their little space stations. And he could see their fleet, 200 ships. The Supreme Commander made a clicking sound of contempt. "Is this all they have?" He asked his tactical officer. 200 ships against 3,000? These creatures are even more foolish than I thought. Perhaps they have surrendered already, the tactical officer suggested. Perhaps they sent their fleet only to escort our landing parties. No, the Supreme Commander said. I heard the voice of their admiral. She believes she can fight. She believes she can win. He leaned forward, his mandibles spreading in what passed for a smile among his kind. I will enjoy teaching her how wrong she is. The Valkyrie fleet continued forward. Far ahead, hidden among the ancient rocks of the Kuiper Belt, Commander Taiho waited in the darkness. His ship, the Silent Thunder, was small and painted black. It carried no lights, no active sensors, nothing that would reveal its presence. Around him, 49 other ships waited in the same darkness. The 7th Stealth Squadron had been hiding here for 3 days, eating cold food and sleeping in shifts. They were tired and cramped and scared, but they were ready. Contact, whispered his sensor officer. Valkyrie fleet is crossing the outer boundary. They'll reach our position in 20 minutes. Taiho nodded slowly. He was a thin man with a sharp nose and clever eyes. He had been a thief in his youth, stealing from the rich and giving to himself. Then a judge had given him a choice, prison or military service. He had chosen the military. Now, 20 years later, he commanded the most dangerous unit in the Terran fleet. Signal all ships, he said quietly. Activate jamming fields on my mark. Not before. We get one chance at this. One chance to blind them. 19 minutes passed like hours. On the hammer of dawn, Admiral Yuna watched the enemy approach. Her bridge crew worked in tense silence, their fingers dancing over control panels, their eyes fixed on screens. Lieutenant Gina, the tactical officer, stood beside the main display, tracking every Valkyrie ship. They're not even scanning properly, Gina said, her voice tight with disbelief. They're so confident they're barely looking for threats. They've never needed to, Yuna replied. No one has ever surprised them. No one has ever hidden from them. They've forgotten what it feels like to be afraid. Should we remind them, Admiral? Yuna almost smiled. Soon, Lieutenant. Very soon. The Valkyrie fleet crossed into the inner solar system. They passed the orbit of Neptune, then Uranus. Their sensors showed the same picture. 200 human ships waiting near Mars, tiny and helpless and alone. The Supreme Commander grew impatient. Increase speed, he ordered. I want to reach their homeworld before the next cycle. This is taking too long. His fleet obeyed, engines roaring to life, pushing the massive warships faster toward their target. They didn't notice the small ships hiding in the asteroid fields they passed. They didn't notice the weapons platforms sleeping beneath the ice of distant moons. They didn't notice the thousands of satellites drifting silently in the darkness, each one carrying enough explosives to destroy a cruiser. Humans had been preparing for this day for 100 years. On Earth, deep beneath a mountain, Dr. Yunji sat in a control room filled with screens and blinking lights. She was a small woman with messy hair and thick glasses, and she had not slept in 3 days. Around her, technicians monitored systems that most people did not know existed. Project Sunfire. It had taken 30 years to build. Thousands of satellites orbiting close to the sun, each one carrying mirrors and focusing lenses. Together, they could collect the energy of a star and aim it like a weapon. It had never been tested in real combat. It had never needed to be. Status? Yunji asked, her voice rough from too much coffee. All collectors online, a technician reported. Power at maximum. Targeting systems ready. We can fire on your command. Yunji nodded and watched the main screen. The Valkyrie fleet appeared as a mass of red dots, moving slowly toward the center of the display. The human fleet appeared as blue dots, seeming small and weak. But there were other dots on her screen. Hidden dots. Waiting dots. Not yet, she murmured to herself. Not yet. The Valkyrie fleet reached the halfway point of the solar system. They passed the orbit of Jupiter, its massive form filling their viewports. Some of the younger Velthari soldiers had never seen a gas giant so large. They stared in wonder at the swirling storms and the dozen moons circling the great planet. They did not notice the weapon platforms hidden on those moons. "Admiral," Commander Taiho's voice came through the secure channel, so quiet it was almost a breath. "They're in position. All ships ready for jamming." Yuna closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, they were hard as stone. Execute. Across the solar system, 50 stealth ships activated their jamming fields at the same moment. The effect was immediate. Every Velthari long-range sensor went blind. Their screens filled with static. Their targeting computers lost their locks. Their communication systems screamed with interference. On the Velthari flagship, alarms began to wail. "What is happening?" The Supreme Commander roared, rising from his throne. "Why can I not see?" "Unknown interference, Commander," his tactical officer stammered, his four hands flying over the controls. "We've lost all long-range sensors. Something is blocking our signals. Find it. Destroy it." But before they could find the source of the jamming, Admiral Yuna gave another command. "Reveal." It was a simple word. A single word. But it changed everything. Across the void, 2,000 Terran warships dropped their cloaking fields. They appeared out of nothing, surrounding the Velthari fleet in a sphere of steel and fire. Orbital defense platforms activated around every moon from Jupiter to Mars. Weapon satellites spun to life, their guns tracking targets. Mining ships that had been disguised as harmless civilian vessels opened their hulls to reveal hidden missiles. The Velthari were not facing 200 ships. They were facing an army. On the bridge of the Hammer of Dawn, Lieutenant Gino watched the tactical display update. The red dots of the Velthari fleet were now surrounded on all sides by blue dots. They were trapped in a cage of their own making. "All weapons platforms online," Gina reported, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Stealth Squadron is in position behind their fleet. They have nowhere to run." Admiral Yuna stood at the center of her bridge, calm and cold and terrible. "Open a channel," she ordered. "Let me speak to their commander one last time." The channel opened. The Supreme Commander's face appeared on screen. For the first time in his long life, he looked uncertain. Behind him, his officers ran in circles, shouting orders, trying to make sense of what was happening. "You dismissed my warning," Yuna said, her voice like ice. "You thought we were prey. You thought wrong." The Supreme Commander tried to regain his composure. "You have more ships than we expected," he admitted. "But we still outnumber you. We will still destroy you." "Perhaps," Yuna said, "but you will not destroy us easily. And you will not destroy us completely. Whatever happens today, the galaxy will know that humanity does not kneel." She cut the channel. The Supreme Commander stared at the blank screen for a long moment. Then he turned to his officers, his mandibles clicking with rage. "Attack formation," he snarled. "Destroy them all. Leave nothing alive." The Velthari fleet began to move, spreading out into battle positions. They were veteran warriors. They had faced desperate enemies before. They had always won. But in the darkness of space, 2,000 human ships powered up their weapons. 10,000 missiles armed themselves. 100,000 soldiers prepared to fight. The first Terran missiles struck the Velthari vanguard with terrible force. Bright flowers of destruction bloomed against the darkness, tearing through alien shields and armor. Ships that had conquered 100 worlds shattered like glass, their crews dying without ever knowing what hit them. But the Velthari were not helpless. They had fought wars across the galaxy. They knew how to respond. "Return fire," the Supreme Commander bellowed. "All batteries, target their fleet. Show these mammals what real weapons look like. The Valkyrie warships opened fire with everything they had. Green energy beams cut through the void, striking Terran ships and burning holes through their hulls. Massive plasma cannons launched balls of superheated gas that could melt steel in seconds. Missiles flew in swarms so thick they looked like clouds. The battle for Earth had begun. On the Hammer of Dawn, Admiral Yuna gripped the railing of her command platform as the ship shook from a near miss. Sparks flew from a damaged console and smoke filled the air. But she did not flinch. She did not look away from the tactical display. "Damage report," she ordered. "Minor hull breach on Deck 7, Lieutenant Gina replied, her fingers flying over her controls. "Shields holding at 60%. We've lost the Braveheart and the Northern Star. Enemy losses are significant." "How significant?" Gina looked up, and there was fire in her eyes. "We've destroyed over 200 of their ships in the first exchange. They didn't expect our railguns." "Railguns. Simple weapons, really. They used electromagnets to fire solid metal slugs at incredible speeds. No energy required for the projectile itself. No fancy technology. Just physics and mathematics and human stubbornness. The Valkyrie shields were designed to stop energy weapons. They were very good at that. But they had trouble with solid objects moving at a fraction of the speed of light. A 1-kilogram slug, fired at the right velocity, could punch through their strongest shields like a bullet through paper. Humanity had learned long ago that sometimes the old ways worked. Lestat, the Supreme Commander, watched his tactical display with growing unease. Red lights flickered across the screen, each one representing a lost ship, a dead crew. He had expected some losses. All battles had casualties, but not like this. Not this fast. "How are they doing this?" he demanded. "Our shields should stop their weapons. Their projectile weapons are defeating our shields," his tactical officer reported, fear creeping into his voice. "They're using kinetic energy instead of directed energy. Our defense systems weren't designed for this." "Then adapt. Find a solution." But there was no time to adapt. The Terran fleet pressed the attack, coordinating with precision that the Valkyrie had never seen. Groups of human ships worked together like wolves, circling enemy vessels and attacking from multiple angles. When one ship's shields weakened, 5 others would focus fire on that spot. Commander Taiho and his stealth squadron appeared behind the Valkyrie fleet like ghosts. Their small ships were invisible until the moment they attacked, launching torpedoes at engine systems and command towers before vanishing into the darkness again. "I can't see them," a Valkyrie captain screamed over the communication channel. "They appear from nothing, they strike, and then they're gone. How do we fight shadows?" Far from the main battle, Captain Dohan watched the fighting from his damaged observation vessel. The Steadfast had taken heavy fire in the first exchange. Half his systems were offline. His engine was barely working, but his weapons still functioned, and his crew was still alive. "Captain," his first officer said, "we're picking up a civilian transport. It broke off from the evacuation convoy. They're heading right into the battle zone." Dahlman's blood went cold. He knew that transport. It was carrying families from the outer colonies, women, children, old people who couldn't fight. They must have gotten confused in the chaos. "Get me there, Captain," he ordered. A frightened face appeared on his screen. A young woman, barely 20 years old, wearing a civilian uniform. "This is the transport morning light," she said, her voice shaking. "We got separated from the convoy. Our navigation computer is damaged. We don't know which way to go." Behind her, Dohan could hear children crying. He looked at his tactical display. The transport was heading toward a group of Valkyrie ships. They would be destroyed in minutes. "Follow me," he said, his voice calm and steady. "I'll guide you out." The Steadfast was slow and limping, but it could still move. Donghan ordered his helmsman to intercept the transport, placing his damaged vessel between the civilians and the enemy. "Captain," his weapons officer said quietly, "if we go that way, we'll pass right through the Valkyrie line. We can't take another hit. Our shields are gone." "I know," Donghan said, "but those children can't take any hits at all. Move the ship." They moved. Deep beneath the earth, Dr. Yoonji watched the battle unfold on her screens. Her technicians worked in focused silence, monitoring power levels and targeting systems. Project Sunfire was ready. All she needed was the order. "Admiral Yuna," she said over the secure channel, "Sunfire is at full power. Requesting permission to fire." Yuna's voice came back through static and noise. "Wait for my signal. The enemy fleet is still too spread out. We need them clustered together." "Understood. But Admiral, we won't get a second shot. The system needs 12 hours to recharge after firing. Then we make the first shot count." "Stand by." The battle raged on. Hour after hour, the two fleets tore at each other. Ships exploded on both sides. Debris fields grew larger. The darkness of space filled with fire and death. The Steadfast reached the morning light and began guiding it away from danger. But a Valkyrie cruiser spotted them. It turned, its weapons powering up, its captain eager for an easy kill. "Incoming fire," Dolan's officer shouted. "We can't evade. We can't block it." Dohan made his decision in a heartbeat. "All crew abandon ship. Get to the escape pods. Now." His crew stared at him in confusion. "That's an order." He roared, "Get off my ship." They ran. They trusted their captain, even when they didn't understand. Within minutes, the escape pods launched, carrying 37 crew members away from the doomed vessel. Dolan stayed at the controls. His hands moved over the navigation panel, turning the Steadfast toward the Valkyrie cruiser. The enemy ship was still charging its weapons. It had not noticed the tiny escape pods scattering into space. "This is Captain Dohan of the observation vessel Steadfast," he said quietly, recording a message that would be found later. "To whoever receives this, I'm sorry I won't be coming home. Tell my wife I love her. Tell my son to be brave. And tell the enemy, we don't surrender." He pushed the engines to maximum. The Steadfast was small and broken, but it was still fast. It crossed the distance to the Valkyrie cruiser in seconds, and the alien gunners had no time to react. The impact was spectacular. The Steadfast struck the Valkyrie cruiser in its fuel section. The explosion that followed was bright enough to be seen from Earth. Both ships disappeared in a ball of white fire that burned for long seconds, before fading into darkness on a morning light. The young captain watched in shock as the brave observation vessel sacrificed itself to save her passengers. The children had stopped crying. They were staring at the distant fire with wide eyes. "Who was that?" one child asked. "A hero," the captain whispered. That was a hero. On the bridge of the Hammer of Dawn, Lieutenant Gina reported the loss of the Steadfast with a voice that trembled only slightly. Admiral Yuna closed her eyes for a moment, honoring the sacrifice of a man she had never met. Then she opened her eyes, and they were harder than before. "Order all ships to Titan formation," she commanded. "Push them back. Push them together. It's time to end this." The Terran fleet surged forward with renewed fury. They had seen their comrades die. They had seen ordinary people become legends. And they would not let those sacrifices be wasted. The Valkyrie fleet, battered and confused, began to pull back. The Supreme Commander was screaming orders, but his officers were too busy trying to survive. The trap was After 6 hours of battle, the Supreme Commander could no longer deny the truth. His forces had lost over 800 ships. His finest captains were dead. His carefully planned invasion was falling apart like sand in water. He stood at the center of his command bridge, watching the tactical display with eyes that no longer showed arrogance. The humans had done something no other species had ever achieved. They had made the Valkyrie afraid. "All ships, defensive formation," he ordered, his voice tight. "Protect the flagship. We need time to regroup." His remaining fleet pulled together, forming a protective shell around the command vessels. It was a desperate move, a sign of weakness. But the Supreme Commander had no other choice. On the Hammer of Dawn, Admiral Una saw the enemy's movement and smiled her cold, small smile. "They're clustering," Lieutenant Gina reported. "Exactly as you predicted." "Signal Dr. Yunji," Una ordered. "Tell her the target is ready." In her underground control room, Yunji received the message. Her heart raced as she turned to her technicians. "Activate Sunfire," she said. "Maximum power. Fire." Far away, closer to the sun than any human ship could safely travel, 3,000 satellites came to life. Their mirrors turned, their lenses focused, and they gathered the endless energy of humanity's star. That energy traveled through space at the speed of light, focused into a beam narrower than a needle, but more powerful than a nuclear weapon. The beam struck the center of the Valkyrie formation. Ships didn't just explode, they vaporized. The focused solar energy cut through shields like they weren't there, through armor like it was paper, through everything in its path. 40 Valkyrie. Ships disappeared in an instant, leaving nothing behind but expanding clouds of gas. Then the beam moved. It swept across the enemy formation like the finger of an angry god, destroying everything it touched. The Valkyrie had never seen anything like it. They couldn't block it. They couldn't run from it. They could only die. When the beam finally faded, 200 more ships were gone. On the Valkyrie flagship, the Supreme Commander watched his fleet burn. His officers were screaming, running, abandoning their posts. The great warship shook from nearby explosions. The lights flickered. The air filled with smoke. For the first time in his life, the Supreme Commander understood what his victims had felt. He understood the terror of facing an enemy that could not be stopped. He understood the despair of knowing that death was coming, and there was nothing he could do. But understanding came too late. Admiral Una opened a channel to all Terran forces. Her voice was broadcast to every human ship, every station, every planet in the solar system. "This is Admiral Una. They came to enslave our children. They came to burn our worlds. They thought we would kneel. They thought we would beg. They were wrong." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was like thunder. "Show them why humanity has never been conquered." The Terran fleet attacked with everything they had left. Railguns fired until their barrels glowed red. Missiles launched in endless streams. Small ships rammed large ones. Damaged vessels refused to retreat, fighting until they could fight no more. Commander Taiho's stealth squadron found itself surrounded. 30 Valkyrie ships had tracked their movements and blocked their escape. The enemy was hungry for revenge, eager to destroy the invisible killers who had caused so much chaos. "Commander," his pilot said, "we're trapped. No way out." Taiho looked at his crew. They were young, most of them. They had families waiting at home. They had lives they wanted to live. But they also knew their duty. "Signal all ships," Taiho said quietly. "Activate self-destruct sequences. Set timers for 30 seconds. And keep transmitting targeting data until the last moment." No one argued. No one cried. They simply obeyed. 50 stealth ships exploded at the same time. The blast destroyed not only themselves, but also the enemy ships that had surrounded them. The targeting data they transmitted in their final moments guided Terran missiles to a dozen more targets. Commander Taiho and his squadron died as they had lived invisible, deadly, and unstoppable. Near the Valkyrie flagship, a Terran destroyer called the Soul's Pride limped through the debris field. It had taken terrible damage. Its engines were failing. Its shields were gone. Most of its crew was dead or wounded. But Captain Hayasu was still alive. She was a large woman with strong arms and a louder voice. She had grown up on a mining colony, working with explosives and heavy machinery. She had joined the fleet because she wanted to see the stars. Now she was seeing them for the last time. "Damage report," she croaked, blood running down her face from a head wound. "We've lost main power," her engineer replied. "Weapons offline. Life support failing. We're dead in space." Hayasu looked at her tactical screen. The Valkyrie flagship was nearby, its own systems damaged but still functioning. If that ship escaped, it could rebuild the fleet. It could return with more forces. The war would continue. "Do we have anything left?" she asked. "Maneuvering thrusters." And the engineer hesitated. "The reactor, it's unstable. If we push it, it will explode." Hayasu nodded slowly. "Can we reach that flagship before it blows?" The engineer stared at her. Then he understood. His face went pale, but he did not look away. "Yes, Captain, we can." "Then do it." The Soul's Pride moved one last time. Its thrusters fired, pushing the broken destroyer toward the enemy flagship. The Valkyrie gunners tried to stop it, but their weapons were damaged too. They could only watch as the human ship came closer. Captain Hayasu opened a channel. She wanted the enemy to hear her voice. "This is Captain Hayasu of the Terran destroyer Soul's Pride. My ship is broken. My crew is dying. But we are not finished. We will never be finished. Remember our names." The Soul's Pride struck the Valkyrie flagship like a hammer. The explosion tore through both ships. The reactor detonated, releasing energy that ripped metal apart and scattered debris across thousands of kilometers. When the light faded, neither ship existed anymore. The Supreme Commander survived barely. He had been near an escape pod when the collision happened. The blast threw him inside, and the automated systems launched the pod before he could even close his eyes. He drifted in space, alone, watching his fleet die around him. His personal warship was gone. His finest officers were gone. His dream of conquest was gone. On the Hammer of Dawn, Admiral Yuna received the reports one by one. The Soul's Pride was destroyed. Commander Taiho's squadron was gone. Captain Dawn had sacrificed himself hours ago. So many good people. So many brave souls. But the battle was almost won. "Enemy fleet is breaking," Lieutenant Gina reported. "Their formation is collapsing. Surviving ships are trying to retreat." Yuna looked at the tactical display. The Valkyrie had lost over half their fleet. The survivors were scattering, running in different directions, desperate to escape the killing ground. "All ships," Yuna ordered, "pursue and destroy. Let none escape." It was a harsh command, but Yuna remembered the worlds the Valkyrie had burned. She remembered the species they had enslaved. She remembered the children they had taken. There would be no mercy. Not today. The Terran fleet chased the fleeing enemy across the solar system. They caught them near Neptune, near Uranus, near the outer edges of the darkness. They destroyed some and disabled others. They captured those who surrendered. By the time the battle ended, only 340 Valkyrie ships remained. Their weapons were empty. Their crews were broken. Their empire's power was shattered. Admiral Yuna looked at the final numbers. Humanity had lost nearly 400 ships and 50,000 lives. It was a terrible price. But they had faced an armada that had never been defeated, and they had won. She closed her eyes and allowed herself one moment of grief. One moment for Captain Dawn. Commander Taiho, Captain Hyesu, and all. The Great Hall on Earth was filled with representatives from every human world. They had come to witness this moment, the moment when the conqueror faced the conquered. But the roles were reversed now. The Supreme Commander, once proud and terrible, looked broken and small. His armor was dented. His forearms hung limp at his sides. His compound eyes, which had watched 1,000 worlds burn, now stared at the floor. President Mireille looked down at him from her platform. Her silver hair caught the light, and her face showed no emotion. "Do you know why you're here?" she asked. The Supreme Commander raised his head slowly. "To be executed," he said, his voice flat and empty. "It is what I would have done." "You're wrong," Mireille replied. "We are not you." The alien stared at her in confusion. "You came to our home with 3,000 ships," Mireille continued. "You came to enslave our children, burn our cities, and destroy our civilization. You dismissed our warning. You laughed at our fleet. You believed we were prey." She stepped forward, and her voice grew harder. 340 of your ships remain. The rest are debris floating in our solar system. Your finest commanders are dead. Your fleet, the fleet that conquered 40 civilizations, is broken. And yet you stand here, alive. Do you understand why? The Supreme Commander shook his head. "Because we are not like you." Marie's eyes burned with cold fire. "We do not slaughter the defeated. We do not enslave the weak. We fight when we must, and we show mercy when we can. That is what makes us human. That is what you never understood." She turned away from him and addressed the gathered representatives. "This creature and his surviving soldiers will be returned to their empire. They will carry a message home, and that message will be heard by every civilization in the galaxy." The hall fell silent. Mireille turned back to the Supreme Commander. When she spoke, her voice was broadcast across the stars. "Tell your emperor what happened here. Tell him that you came to Earth with the greatest fleet your empire has ever assembled, and we destroyed it. Tell him that we gave you a chance to leave, and you chose to stay. Tell him that was your last mistake." She leaned closer, and her next words were spoken quietly, meant only for his ears. "And tell him this. If he ever sends ships to our space again, we will not stop at defending our home. We will come to his. We will find his throne, and we will make him answer for every world his empire has burned." The Supreme Commander shivered. He had faced many enemies in his long life. He had seen species beg, threaten, and curse him, but he had never seen anything like the cold promise in this human's eyes. She meant every word. The surviving Velthari were loaded onto their damaged ships and released. They limped away from Earth, carrying their wounded and their dead, carrying the memory of defeat. As they passed the edge of human space, they looked back at the small blue world that had broken their empire's power. They would not forget. On Earth, the celebrations were mixed with grief. Humanity had won its greatest victory, but the cost was terrible. 50,000 soldiers had died defending their home. Hundreds of families had lost sons and daughters, fathers and mothers, brothers and sisters. Admiral Yuna attended the memorial service in person. She stood in a field of white flowers, looking at the names carved into a great wall of black stone. So many names. So many lights gone out. She found Captain Dohan's name and touched it gently. She had never met him, but she knew his story. He had sacrificed his ship to save children he would never meet. He had died so that others might live. "Thank you," she whispered. "We won because of you. All of you." Lieutenant Gina, Commander Gina now, promoted for her service in the battle, stood beside her. "Admiral," Gina said quietly, "the rebuilding has begun. The shipyards are working around the clock. Within a year, our fleet will be stronger than ever. Yuna nodded but did not look away from the wall. That's good, but I hope we never have to use it. Do you think they'll come back? Yuna was silent for a long moment. Someday, perhaps. The galaxy is full of those who would take what we have. But now they know. Now they understand what happens when they try. She finally turned away from the memorial wall and looked up at the sky. The sun was setting, painting the clouds in shades of orange and red. We are not a species that starts wars, Yuna said, but we are very good at ending them. Far across the galaxy, the surviving Veltari ships finally reached their home system. The Emperor himself came to meet them, eager to hear of victory and conquest. Instead, he found broken ships, broken soldiers, and a broken Supreme Commander. The Great Hall of the Veltari Empire was dark and cold. The Emperor sat on his throne of bones, watching as the survivors told their story. He listened to descriptions of human weapons that punched through shields. He heard about stealth ships that appear from nothing. He learned of a beam of sunlight that could vaporize entire squadrons. And he heard the message that President Mireille had sent. When the last survivor finished speaking, the Emperor sat in silence. His forearms gripped the arms of his throne so tightly that the bone cracked. 3,000 ships, he said finally. The greatest fleet we have ever assembled. And these humans destroyed it? Yes, Emperor, the Supreme Commander said, his voice hollow. They were ready for us. They had been ready for centuries. They hid their strength until we were deep in their territory, and then they struck. Why did you not retreat when you saw their true numbers? The Supreme Commander lowered his head. They blocked our escape routes, and he hesitated. And what? And we underestimated them. We thought they were prey. We thought they would break and run. Instead, they fought harder as the battle continued. They sacrificed themselves to destroy our ships. They did not fear death. The Emperor was silent again. Then he rose from his throne and walked to a window. Outside, the stars glittered like ice. For 1,000 years, our empire has conquered the weak, he said quietly. We took what we wanted. We destroyed those who resisted. No one could stop us. He turned back to face the survivors. These humans have changed things. Word of this defeat will spread. Other species we have crushed will hear that the Veltari can be beaten. They will grow bold. They will resist. What shall we do, Emperor? An advisor asked. The Emperor looked at the Supreme Commander, at the broken creature who had once been his greatest warrior. We will rebuild, the Emperor said. We will make new ships, train new soldiers. But we will not return to human space. Not now. Perhaps not ever. Emperor, our honor demands. Our honor demands nothing. The Emperor roared. Our survival demands everything. These humans are not prey. They are predators who pretend to be prey. They are wolves in the skins of sheep. If we attack them again, they will not just defeat us. They will destroy us. He sat back on his throne, suddenly looking old and tired. Tell no one what happened here. Erase the records of the battle. The humans do not exist. The fleet was lost to a navigation error. That is the official story. But stories have a way of escaping within months. Whispers spread across the galaxy. Travelers talked of a blue world called Earth, where a small species of mammals had done the impossible. They spoke of ships that appeared from nothing, of weapons made of sunlight, of warriors who would rather die than surrender. Civilizations that had cowered under Veltari rule began to lift their heads. Scientists and soldiers studied the rumors, trying to learn how the humans had won. Diplomats wondered if Earth might be interested in alliances, and in the dark corners of the galaxy, where slaves worked in Veltari mines and prisons, hope began to grow. On Earth, Commander Gina took charge of rebuilding the fleet. She worked hard, sleeping little, driven by the memory of those who had died. Every ship she built was a promise that humanity would never be caught unprepared again. Admiral Yuna retired a year after the battle. She had given everything she had, and now she wanted peace. She bought a small house on the coast and spent her days watching the ocean, remembering the friends she had lost. But on the wall of her home, she kept a picture. It showed the Hammer of Dawn on the day it was launched, young and proud and ready for adventure. Below the picture was a simple phrase, handwritten in her careful script. We warned them. They didn't listen. And in the center of the galaxy, a Veltari soldier limped into the Emperor's throne room one last time. He was ancient now, scarred and broken, the sole survivor of the flagship ruins that Captain Hyesu had destroyed. The Emperor looked at him with tired eyes. "What is it?" The soldier fell to his knees. His voice was barely a whisper, but it echoed in the silent hall. "They warned us," he said. "They warned us, and we didn't listen." Then he collapsed, and he did not rise again. The galaxy had learned a new truth. Humanity did not seek war.